Hi, I'm Nate Anderson, an Army veteran, Green Beret, and the Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America. I want to welcome you to this Concerned Veterans for America virtual town hall featuring Congressman Ro Khanna of California. I want to start by wishing everybody well, and I hope that you and your families are safe, that you're healthy during this time, and we're really happy to have you with us. Our mission is to advocate for policies that preserve the freedom and the prosperity that we and our families sacrificed to defend. And every veteran took an oath when they entered into service. And that responsibility doesn't end when we hang up the uniform. And many of us choose to continue serving our country. Concerned Veterans for America is for those who choose that, who want to preserve the ideals and the opportunities that we cherish in this country. And our voices are a truly powerful thing, because people pay attention and people listen to us when we come together. In our mission statement, I said that we advocate for policy, and the public policy is going to be the conversation that we're going to have today with our special guest. And we're here with Representative Ro Khanna to talk through some important issues that our nation is facing. So I'm excited for the discussion. I hope that this is a valuable discussion for everybody joining us. Let me introduce our special guest. Congressman Ro Khanna represents California's 17th Congressional District, located at the heart of Silicon Valley, and is serving in his second term. He sits on the House Budget, Armed Services, and Oversight and Reform Committees. Representative Khanna was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and both of his parents immigrated to the United States from India in the 1970s. Prior to serving in Congress, Representative Khanna taught economics at Stanford University, law at Santa Clara University, and American jurisprudence at San Francisco State University. He also served on the Obama administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And Representative Khanna received his BA in economics from the University of Chicago and a law degree from Yale University. And he resides in Fremont, California. Representative, welcome to this virtual town hall with Concerned Veterans for America. I really appreciate you giving us your time, and it's an honor to have you with us.
Well, Nate, it's my honor to be here. First of all, thank you for your service to our nation. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you to all the veterans who are listening for your incredible service to our country. I'm honored to be with you.
Thank you. I want to start first just by asking how you and your staff and your constituents are doing during this time.
Well, thanks, Nate, for asking. It's a tough time. Of course, the wildfires have affected our district. Fortunately, the firefighters have it under control. Just yesterday, I was talking to the chief of Alameda County, the fire chief, and he said that there are not going to be any more evacuation warnings. They feel like they have contained the fire. So we fortunately have not had any loss of life or major property damage, though a few firefighters were injured. They're going to be fine and recover. But compounded with the pandemic, it's really been a challenge for our state and our district.
Well, we're glad you're doing well, and our thoughts are with everybody as they fight that challenge. I'd like to get into our discussion and start with a question about some of the work you've recently been doing. You've been well known for your willingness to work with partners across the political spectrum in pursuit of a shared vision for what you would call a restrained foreign policy. What kind of lessons have you learned from these kinds of efforts? And how do you view the outlook of these continued cross-partisan or nonpartisan coalitions on policy items in the future?
Well, it's been very important to work across the aisle to make sure that we protect American security and not send our troops in harm's way unless it's absolutely necessary. I mean, you know more than any of us the extraordinary risk that people put themselves on when you deploy troops. And there is a consensus that we have over-deployed, that we have engaged in interventions that have put our men and women in harm's way, depleted our resources, and haven't necessarily advanced America's security interests. People feel this about Iraq. They feel this about our involvement with Yemen. They feel they want to make sure that we don't get involved in another Middle East war in Iran. So I've actually found a consensus, not just among the Progressives caucus, where I'm a member, but also with many Freedom Caucus members who say, let's not make another blunder of a costly war.
Just an extension on that, it's pretty remarkable how truly authentic collaboration and progress can be made when we set aside differences and when we come together with a sincere desire to do the right thing. And as our nation is confronting some pretty divisive, very difficult challenges, what kind of advice do you have for other leaders across our society who also feel that desire to bring people together on common ground?
Well, I think it's to look for areas where you may have a shared perspective. We all care deeply about America. We all want America to lead in the 21st century. How do we find common ground of things that we can agree will advance this nation, and how can we disagree without ridiculing each other and calling into question each other's fundamental character? I think if you have principled disagreements, I mean, Matt Gaetz and I disagree. I'm for Medicare for all. He probably thinks that's crazy, but we don't attack each other in deeply personal ways. We say, okay, we have a different philosophy about our obligation on healthcare, but we have a similar perspective on making sure we don't get into wars that aren't in our country's interest. So I think you have to look at the common areas to move the country forward.
That's great. You just mentioned war, and I want to talk about that a little bit more in depth here. You're known as an early opponent of the 2003 invasion of Iraq and as an advocate for withdrawing U.S. troops from some of our open-ended deployments and engagements in countries like Afghanistan or Syria. Why do you believe it's necessary to end these so-called endless wars that so many people call? And how can doing so truly further our interests in the future as a nation?
Well, our mission in Afghanistan has totally morphed into something unrecognizable. I mean, I supported the initial strikes, the idea that we were struck on 9/11, that we were hit, and that Al-Qaeda was responsible. Obviously, something had to be done. Those terrorists had to be taken out, and we did that successfully. And that was done over 15 years ago. I don't understand why we're still there. The fact that we are trying to build a sustainable pluralistic democracy in Afghanistan is a fool's errand. The Russians weren't able to do it. The British weren't able to do it. India hasn't been able to have that kind of influence on Afghanistan. Why do we think we, sitting on the other side of the world with such limited troops, by the way, 5, 10, 15,000, are going to be able to do that? And people say, well, we have to protect women and children. Well, women and children are currently dying. The conflict is leading to violence, which is actually taking thousands of lives, not just putting our lives at risk. And then you look at the cost, $50 billion a year. I mean, $50 billion could have high-speed internet for every American. $50 billion could have free public college for every American. And I think if you asked Americans, do you think we need to continue to be in Afghanistan, or would you like us to invest in our country? They would say the latter. So it's time to bring our troops home. I've crossed the aisle here. I've said when the president has said he wants to bring the troops home, I've supported that.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned the American public on this, and I think that there's often a divide between thinking in Washington, D.C., and then thinking across the rest of the nation. We know what many in the foreign policy establishment want in this scenario, which is a persistent presence, persistent engagement in these countries across the Middle East or across Africa. How does that differ? How do you believe it differs from what the American public want after almost 2 decades of conflict?
Well, I think the American public, rather that we put those resources into building our infrastructure, into investing in our healthcare and investing in our education, they don't want America to be an empire. What makes us such a unique democracy is that we don't have imperial ambition like the British did, like the Romans did. We are strong and we will not condone or tolerate or stand any country attacking us. but we don't seek to meddle around the world. That's not the American way. We seek to be an example to the world of what a multiracial democracy can be, and to inspire the world. And so I think that's what the American public was. They don't want us balancing great power politics in the Middle East. They don't want us entering these conflicts that are unwinnable. They rather us focus on developing our own nation. And I think that sentiment is finally breaking through in Washington.
That's certainly what polling has shown also, recently. I want to ask you about the authorizations that allow our involvement in these engagements. So since the adoption of, after the 9/11 attacks, the 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force, or AUMF, as many people refer to it, it's been used and invoked over 40 times across 19 different countries to justify military force just in the past couple of decades, which is far beyond the original intended scope of the authorization. And your previous National Defense Authorization Act amendment attempted to limit this trend by ensuring that a new AUMF would be required to initiate military action in a future engagement. Should a new AUMF be required for future conflicts, and how can it be constructed so that it's limiting in its potential for misuse beyond what Congress intends of it?
Here I actually think Pete Buttigieg had a good idea where he said that there should be automatic sunsets on the authorization of force, that if a Congress passes something, maybe it automatically expires after 3 years. We can debate the timeline, so that a Congress has to continually reauthorize it if we're extending our troops. And the reason people say, well, it's difficult to get Congress to agree. Well, that's what our framers intended. They wanted the decision about war and peace to be difficult. And by the way, it was not difficult when we were hit on 9/11. Almost everyone said, yes, we have to go get the terrorists who did this. I mean, President Bush, who I disagree with vehemently, his approval rating was 90% to go take action. So I believe when there is really a cause where force is justified, when our national security is really at risk, the country will mobilize and Congress will authorize it. Where you have disagreement is when you have things like get involved in Yemen, where most Americans, frankly, don't know much about Yemen or the suffering there, and they wonder, how is that connected to the safety of constituents in my district? And that's where you have a pushback from Congress, but that's legitimate pushback.
Yeah. So stepping back a little bit to look at this issue of authorization, you've been vocal about the need for Congress to reassert its Article 1 role in authorizing U.S. military deployments and decisions to go to war. But given the willingness of Congress to cede these decisions to the executive branch in the recent decades, how do you think Congress can overcome the challenges of fulfilling its constitutional duties here? And really, how important is it that the efforts on this front are done in a cross-partisan way, regardless of who controls the executive branch?
I do think it's very important for it to be bipartisan or nonpartisan, and then to build as broad a coalition. And there's no reason why we can't. There's no reason issues of war and peace have to be partisan. What will make Congress more vocal on it is if people take it more seriously as a voting issue. And you beginning to see that they are. They are understanding that the massive amounts of money that has been going into these wars, trillions of dollars, is hurting America's ability to invest in our homeland. That you don't see China out there getting in wars all over the place. And that's giving them a competitive advantage because they're able to marshal their resources and focus on their own country. So I think that the public is demanding change. Yeah.
You mentioned Saudi Arabia a few minutes ago, and I want to point to this specific scenario where you were a leading voice in the debate on the Hill. You were a strong proponent of congressional efforts that would block some proposed arms sales to the Saudi and other Gulf monarchies in support of what they're doing in Yemen in those campaigns. Can you explain the problem that these kinds of sales might pose for our interests and the issues around invoking emergency authority to expedite them through Congress?
Well, the Saudis were engaged in a brutal bombing campaign in Yemen that was taking the lives of thousands of people, causing a potential famine, hurting women and children. Now, the Houthis aren't blameless, but everyone understood that there had to be a diplomatic solution and that there shouldn't have been a blockade of Yemen. And there is absolutely no reason that the United States should have our weapons landing and killing kids. There's absolutely no advantage to the United States. It's inconsistent with our moral principles, but it also makes us look bad in the world. It fuels greater anger at the United States. So we should have made it very clear that we were not going to refuel any of Saudi's planes bombing in Yemen, and that we weren't going to be supplying them with arms while they were engaged in this brutal, inhumane campaign. We passed this war powers on a bipartisan basis to restrict the refueling, both the Senate and the House. And even though the president vetoed it, he voluntarily suspended the refueling. And if you talk to Mattis or Martin Griffiths at the UN, they'll tell you that that really has facilitated some of the peace agreements. So you see that when public reacted here, Congress acted, and the administration was responsive.
Yeah. You know, in a related note, I want to talk about defense spending. You mentioned Secretary of Defense Mattis. He's spoken to this issue, the issue of our debt. Given the emergency response to COVID-19, the United States faces what's an unprecedented deficit this year. And Admiral Mike Mullen, Secretary Mattis, they warned years ago that our probably the greatest national security threat that we face is our debt. And with DoD budgets being such a large driver of spending every single year, it's a contributor to that debt. Do you think that defense spending levels should be reevaluated? And are there any specific areas within DoD's budget that you think cost savings could be achieved?
I do. I think, look, we're at a budget that is more than the eight other countries, the next countries combined. I mean, it's over 50% of the federal discretionary budget, $740 billion. One of the things we don't need is the modernization of ICBMs. I mean, we have such sophisticated deterrence through our submarines and our aerial force. And as actually Secretary Mattis has said, the ICBMs have put us at greatest risk for accidental nuclear war. I mean, if you have a nuclear strike authorized by a submarine or a aerial bomber, you can bring it back. You can't bring back an ICBM if it's accidentally launched. So there's the billions of dollars that are going into modernization, the billions of dollars that are going into some of these contractors that are overcharging. All of these things are things that should be cut. And we should be strong still. I mean, everyone understands we need a strong military, strong defense, but we don't need the waste, and we don't need some of the excess. And that money, I believe, would be better served in building a jobs program, building our education, building our infrastructure.
Certainly. One final question. Because you represent Silicon Valley, and you've been a strong proponent for the use of innovative technologies to solve problems. And as a veterans organization, that's something we definitely keep an eye on, especially in the realm of VA healthcare. The VA, the broader healthcare industry, has been utilizing so many more telehealth technologies to reach their patients, especially during COVID-19. And it's been gaining a lot more traction as people rely on them. Can you tell us a little bit about the benefits of telehealth services using technology in medicine as we're fighting this pandemic?
I think it has extraordinary benefits. One, you can, through both telehealth and through artificial intelligence, now have personalized, individualized medicine. So you no longer have to guess about someone who's a veteran who may have been in Afghanistan or Iraq and think, okay, what type of symptoms do they have, and does this fall into a group, and then give some generic treatment. Now you can look at their DNA, you can look at their family history, you can look at the specifics of where they were and say, here is how we treat or prevent an illness from happening for this particular person. That could be transformative in medicine, to think about tailor-made medical solutions, and then to make it easy for people to have some of that treatment or that accessibility without having to go into a hospital, without having to go into a doctor's office, that can really put less burden on patients. So I am extremely hopeful and optimistic about telehealth and some of the artificial intelligence and advances in medicine to lower our healthcare costs and to provide better healthcare.
Yeah, it's exciting, really, to watch it develop and transform. And like you said, everybody has their own unique needs, and it's important that we build systems that are able to give patients the experience and the care that they need, given their unique needs.
But ultimately, I would say, one of the most moving things I've done as a member of Congress is go to Walter Reed the hospital, and there you realize even all the technology is not can't make up for the human spirit, and what you really are seeing there is just this incredible spirit of both the doctors and the nurses, and of course the veterans themselves, to be resilient. And you meet people who want to go back out and serve more, and no technology can make up for that just love of country, love of service. And so ultimately, I think that's what, on a bipartisan basis, we need to celebrate and see more of in this country. Yeah,
it's an inspiring group of folks who serve our country and their families who stand behind them. It's awe-inspiring, really, to watch them. Well, this has been terrific dialogue. I appreciate it. As we wrap up, Congressman, are there any final words for the audience regarding some of these important issues that we've been discussing this afternoon?
Well, let me just again thank people for their service and say your voice matters a lot, because there is no greater credibility that someone has than wearing our nation's uniform, and no greater honor than to wear our nation's uniform. And so when people who are veterans come and speak, Congress listens, people listen. Unfortunately, people have lost faith in so many institutions in this country, certainly in Congress, in the presidency. I'm not saying this particular president, any presidency, in the media. But the one place that people continue to have respect for is for those who serve. And so I would just urge you to be active in politics, participate, share your perspective. It can really make a big difference.
Thank you for sharing that. That's why this organization exists, and we're very passionate about giving people that opportunity to have their voice heard, and that's what we're designed for. So, Representative, I want to thank you for giving us your time, as well as your staff who helped support this. And I want to thank the Concerned Veterans for America team who made this possible also. A lot of hard work went into it. But finally, I just want to thank all of you who joined us, who tuned in. I hope this was valuable for you. I hope you'll stay connected with us also. And if you want to stay connected and follow us, you can learn more about Concerned Veterans for America at our website, which is cv4a.org. We're on Twitter at Concerned Vets, and we're on Facebook, Concerned Vets for America. So follow us there, interact with us. We want to hear from you. And if you agree particularly with what you heard during this conversation around these endless wars that we've been fighting, and you want to do something about it, I just want to invite everybody to visit a special campaign website that we have set up. It's called endendlesswars.com. And you can go there with just a click of a button. You can send a letter to your representative, to your senators, and to the president, asking our leaders in Washington to bring an end, a speedy end to this conflict in Afghanistan, and bring our troops home to their families here back home. That's endendlesswars.com. Go and check it out. We hope you take action with us. So thank you for joining us. We hope everybody stays well and safe. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.